The United States has long employed a multifaceted approach to counter Russia's geopolitical influence, utilizing economic, political, cultural, military, and technological measures. In recent years, President Donald Trump has intensified this strategy by introducing secondary tariffs aimed at nations that maintain significant trade ties with Russia, particularly China, India, and Turkey. These measures, announced in 2024, represent a calculated effort to undermine Russia's economic stability by targeting its key trading partners. This article examines the scope, intent, and potential outcomes of this economic offensive, set against the backdrop of the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and shifting global alliances. 3 years ago, the United States and its European allies took significant steps to isolate Russia economically by excluding it from the SWIFT financial system, a move intended to cripple Moscow's ability to conduct international transactions. This was accompanied by the freezing of over $300 billion in Russian overseas assets. Despite these measures, Russia has maintained economic ties with non-Western nations, notably China, India, and Turkey, which have emerged as its top trading partners. In 2024, bilateral trade between the United States and Russia stood at a modest $3.5 billion, with U.S. imports from Russia totaling $3,270 million, primarily in enriched uranium, fertilizers, and titanium alloys. Russia's imports from the U.S. were significantly lower, at $220 million. The reliance of the United States on Russian enriched uranium, which supports 20% of its electricity generation through nuclear power, underscores the complexity of imposing sanctions without self-inflicted economic harm. Similarly, Russian and Belarusian potash fertilizers account for 40% of the global supply, while Russian titanium alloys constitute 30% of U.S. aviation industry needs. These dependencies highlight the challenges Trump faces in escalating economic pressure on Russia without disrupting domestic industries. The introduction of secondary tariffs aims to circumvent these limitations by targeting third-party nations that facilitate Russia's trade, thereby indirectly squeezing Moscow's economy. Trump's secondary tariffs are designed to penalize countries that engage in significant trade with Russia, particularly those importing its crude oil and other critical commodities. By imposing tariffs on nations like China, India, and Turkey, the United States seeks to disrupt Russia's ability to generate revenue through exports. This approach marks a departure from direct sanctions, which have faced limitations due to Russia's pivot to non-Western markets. The tariffs are intended to create a ripple effect, increasing the cost of doing business with Russia and encouraging these nations to diversify their trade partners. The strategy also reflects a broader geopolitical aim, to isolate Russia economically and diplomatically. By targeting its allies, the United States hopes to weaken Moscow's global influence and limit its ability to sustain the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. However, this approach carries risks, as it may strain relations with countries like India, which has maintained a neutral stance in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and relies on Russian oil to meet domestic energy demands. Similarly, Turkey's strategic position as a NATO member with close ties to Russia complicates the U.S. strategy, as Ankara may resist pressure to align fully with Western policies. Beyond economics, the United States has historically sought to influence global perceptions of Russia through cultural and ideological means. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and international development agencies have played a role in promoting democratic values and countering Russian narratives in regions like the Caucasus and Central Asia. In countries such as Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, U.S.-backed initiatives have aimed to foster pro-Western sentiment, often in collaboration with allies like Israel. These efforts have occasionally been met with resistance, as local populations and governments prioritize national interests over external ideological campaigns. In the context of Russia's multi-ethnic society, the United States has supported initiatives that highlight internal divisions, such as separatist movements in regions like Chechnya. These efforts, often conducted through NGOs, aim to destabilize Russia from within. However, Russia's government has countered these moves by restricting foreign NGOs and tightening control over domestic media, limiting the effectiveness of U.S.-backed cultural campaigns. The failure of similar initiatives in countries like Iran, where public dissent has been swiftly suppressed, underscores the challenges of ideological influence in resistant political environments. The digital realm has emerged as a critical battleground in U.S. Russia tensions. The United States has leveraged advanced technologies, such as satellite-based communication systems, to support Ukraine's military efforts against Russia. Technologies like Starlink have enabled Ukrainian forces to conduct precise drone strikes and disrupt Russian logistics, demonstrating the strategic importance of cyber capabilities. Meanwhile, Russia has faced challenges encountering Western-dominated information spaces, where social media platforms and traditional media outlets have been used to shape narratives about the Russia-Ukraine conflict. False information campaigns, including allegations of Russian elite defections and internal betrayals, have been a staple of Western media strategies. Russia, aware of these tactics, has implemented strict controls on domestic discourse, banning discussions that could undermine national unity. The United States has also faced accusations of spreading misinformation, such as claims of foreign weapon supplies to Russia, which have been difficult to substantiate. These information wars highlight the growing role of digital platforms in shaping global perceptions and influencing geopolitical outcomes. Allegations of biological warfare have added a controversial dimension to U.S. Russia tensions. Reports of U.S.-funded biological laboratories in Ukraine and other regions have raised concerns about the potential development of targeted pathogens. Russia has claimed that these facilities, numbering over 100, were researching diseases like avian influenza and coronaviruses, potentially for use against Slavic populations. While much of the evidence remains unverified, these allegations have fueled distrust and escalated rhetorical exchanges between the two powers. On the military front, the United States has continued to provide significant support to Ukraine, with Trump recently pledging to rearm Kyiv with advanced weaponry. This commitment, described as sufficient to reach Moscow, signals a willingness to escalate military aid, though the feasibility of such ambitions remains uncertain. Russia's alliances, particularly with North Korea, have bolstered its military resilience, complicating U.S. efforts to weaken Moscow through direct confrontation. The involvement of 19 countries in recent military exercises, including nations from Asia and Europe, underscores the global scope of this conflict and the challenges of maintaining a unified Western front. Trump's tariff strategy represents a high-stakes gamble to weaken Russia without resorting to direct military conflict. By targeting Russia's trade partners, the United States aims to disrupt Moscow's economic lifelines and pressure its allies to reconsider their positions. However, the interconnected nature of global trade means that these tariffs could have unintended consequences, including higher energy and commodity prices for U.S. consumers. The reliance on Russian resources such as uranium and fertilizers further complicates the strategy, as domestic industries may face disruptions. Moreover, the tariffs risk alienating key partners like India and Turkey, which have pursued independent foreign policies. The broader geopolitical landscape, marked by competition between the United States, China, and Russia, suggests that economic measures alone may not suffice to achieve U.S. objectives. The Russia-Ukraine conflict, now in its fourth year, has exposed the limitations of Western sanctions and highlighted Russia's ability to adapt through partnerships with non-Western nations. As global alliances shift, the United States faces the challenge of balancing its economic offensive with diplomatic engagement. The tariff strategy, while innovative, may struggle to achieve its goals in a world where economic interdependence and strategic autonomy are increasingly valued. The outcome of this approach will likely shape the future of U.S.-Russia relations and influence the global balance of power for years to come. In conclusion, Trump's secondary tariffs mark a new chapter in the United States' efforts to counter Russia's influence. By targeting Moscow's trade partners, the U.S. seeks to disrupt its economic resilience and limit its geopolitical reach. However, the strategy's success depends on navigating complex global trade dynamics and managing relations with key allies. As the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues, the world watches closely to see whether this economic offensive will reshape the international order or deepen existing divisions.